So advanced forms of writing requires that you do more than writing he said this or she said that. These forms of writing are boring, bland, and they don't really add anything to the world. So in this video, what we're gonna do is go over the difference between a finite and a non-finite clause. We're then gonna review differences of a non-finite clause. We're specifically gonna look at gerunds and infinitives. And then we're gonna do some exercises with gerunds and infinitives and see how we can use them for the different functions within the writing. So a non-finite clause is quite simply understood from the context it's placed in. Non-finites look like verbs, but they don't operate as verbs, which means they're actionless words. They're meant to generalize or provide information to your sentence. The main difference between a finite and non-finite clause is that a finite tends to have a resolution by the end. They're able to describe something that happened in the past, they can describe something that's happening now, and they're able to describe something in the future. A non-finite clause, on the other hand, is tenseless, which means they need resolution. Non-finite clauses are dependent on the main clause, which means they need something finite or something resolute to describe and to operate with. So here's some quick examples of the difference between a finite and non-finite clause. One of them is, I offended my father. So this happened in the past and it's already been resolved. It happened as a fact. The non-finite form of this is, I regret offending my father. So this is talking about the subject's regret and not so much them offending the father. This is something that's still operating and they feel bad for what they did in the past. So notice that both the finite and the non-finite have a noun phrase or a certain phrase that they're referring to. This is their main verb or the main idea that they are trying to expand upon. Here's another example of a finite. Los Angeles banned house parties in 2020. So this is a fact, it did happen and it's been resolved somehow in the past. The non-finite form of this is, to stop the spread of COVID-19 in Los Angeles would mean to ban house parties in the city. The non-finite here is to stop the spread of COVID-19. This is known as an infinitive and it's just describing a general situation that needs some kind of resolution. So it needs some kind of policy to push this ban to happen. So one thing you need to notice is that non-finites are general statements. They need a context to be placed in and they need to be understood based on their actionless verbs. So there's three main non-finites to worry about. There's the gerund, participles, and the infinitives. But for this video, we're only going to focus on the gerund and the infinitive. So as we mentioned before, the best thing about the non-finite clause is that they can function anywhere within the sentence, which means they can function as a subject, an object, or complement your sentence and modify in some way, which means they can be used as an adjective or an adverb. Another important thing to remember is that non-finite cannot stand on its own, which means it needs a main clause to refer to. So now let's do some exercises to practice the non-finite and see if we can use them in their specific functions within a sentence. That means as a subject or an object or as a modifier. So let's start with a gerund. And a gerund is essentially a word that looks like a verb but doesn't do any action. And these are words that always tend to have ing in the end. So how are you going to practice making a gerund? Well, the best way to do it is by making two main clauses and then try to combine them and to make it a general idea. So let's start with your subject and your verb. Let's do I play and let's attach it to an object, which is baseball. Let's make another main clause that refers back to that first clause we made, which would be it is, and then let's add an object or a modifier, a hard sport. So your two main clauses here is going to be I play baseball, it is a hard sport, which is a lie because baseball is not a hard sport. So saying these statements or putting it into a paper is actually kind of boring, is bland, and you need to excite this and put them together in some way to make it more flavorful. So what we're going to do is talk about that verb, play, and we're going to make it into a neutral statement. We're going to add ing into play to make it playing. And then we're going to combine it with the second main clause. Playing baseball is our subject, and we're going to describe it as a hard sport. So we're going to say playing baseball is a hard sport, which is lying again. And now you just made your gerund with a subject on it. So you can see that playing baseball is a subject. But what if you want to be selfish and keep yourself as the main subject? So you can use playing baseball as the object of your sentence, and you can say, I find that playing baseball is very hard. So essentially you just attach yourself as a main topic, I find, and then you added your object, playing baseball. What if you want to use playing baseball as a modifier? Well, now you can say, I was exhausted after playing baseball. So you can see you can use the gerund as a non-finite clause that could add flavor or add a total different context to the things you're trying to say. All right, so let's get to our second non-finite, which is the infinitive. So similar to the gerund, the infinitive is a neutral statement that can stand on its own, but it's almost always best to be used as an object of your sentence. So to identify the infinitive, it's pretty simple. You just gonna look for the word that starts with to and it has that verb to it. So an example is to be, another example is to take, another example is to run. So in Hamlet, you see to be or not to be. That's an infinitive. So as I mentioned, one of the best ways to use the infinitive is as a modifier to your sentence. So an example would be, we considered it sensible to take her advice. So in this sentence, it's almost obligatory to have to take her advice, because though we considered it sensible could stand alone, you do want some extra information to provide more details to your context. So the best way to practice the infinitive is similar to the gerund practice, where you create a main clause, but you add in order to at the end of the clause. So this phrase in order to is really useful to use, but don't use it often because it gets annoying to see in order to a lot of times. So here's an example of how to do it. So my main clause or my complete idea that I want to make is I go to the gym. I'm going to complement my main clause and add in order to. So I'm going to write I go to the gym in order to get fit. In order to get fit, there's my infinitive. So let's make another one. I have a main clause. I'll say I listen to my wife. Now I'm going to complement it at the end with in order to. So I'm going to say I listen to my wife in order to do what? To make her happy. So here's an extra fun fact about the infinitive. The infinitive could be in the to form, or that means it could start with to and anywhere in the sentence, but it could also be known as a bare infinitive, where it just has nothing with it. So something you'll see in science papers or doctor speak or nurse speech in general is that they use the bare infinitive a lot. So an example of the bare infinitive on use is saying, this study shows that running on one leg may result in enhanced muscle fibers on your right leg. So the infinitive here is the word result, and what I'm attaching it to is the word may. So may result is kind of a general statement that's saying that if you were to run on one leg, you might have bigger muscles on your right leg. So this is a really important key element for the infinitive, and it's that the infinitive is a general statement that will allow the reader to engage with your writing and participate in critical thinking, and that participation is really important when you're in advanced forms of writing. This is a possibility that needs further discovery, and somebody else out there, another scientist, might be taking the time to prove these possibilities or find a resolution. So as a recap, the non-finite, you can use it in different functions throughout the sentence to add flavor and to add further content into your writing. I'll show another video of how to write a paragraph or how to answer to a typical prompt and how to use the non-finites to kind of add some oomph to your paragraph. And finally, don't forget, work hard, don't give up, focus on your writing, be happy with what you do. And roses are red, violets are blue. Nobody loves you as much as I love you. All right, peace.